Just because you take a detour doesn't mean you're lost. Some journeys take longer and are more challenging, but we still can make it there. In life and in the classroom, our perception of our ability to affect the journey is what really matters. So let's talk about that. Welcome to the Andy Jacks Podcast, a reflection on education, leadership, and life. Please consider hitting that like button, sharing with others, and letting me know what you think. All right, thanks for joining me today. In this episode, we're going to get into the sense of control, this idea of control, what that means, and how does that affect us. So we'll start with a little bit of a story. I think stories are a great way to explain a concept, right? So in this story, we're going to talk about my honeymoon. And don't worry, we're not going to get too graphically detailed on the honeymoon. And my wife, I'm sure, will listen. She's my biggest supporter, and I appreciate that. She will probably listen. And so I'll try to make this as accurate as I remember in this sense. So in our honeymoon, we were very privileged to go to St. Lucia. And if you've ever gone to like a Caribbean islands like St. Lucia, it is absolutely gorgeous. And it was literally picture perfect setting for a honeymoon. But we had two different versions of what we probably wanted to do on our honeymoon. Again, keeping this clean. I like the adventurous kind of things. I like to, go four-wheeling and, scuba diving and all that stuff. She wanted to just sit on the beach and listen to the waves and read and just enjoy that time. Neither one's wrong, but then we're also like sort of fighting over, and this is early on in the marriage, of course, like the first week we're married, as to what we wanted to do during this period of time. And somehow you have to magically agree to everything you're doing since you're now married, which at the very beginning was hard. It doesn't get any easier if you're wondering. So we decided, and I badgered her into going on this catamaran, which is like a little sailboat. And these are little ones where it's just like a two-person catamaran with a little sail and a couple of these little, I don't know what they're called, like little, almost like little canoes that hold this like netting in between them. And you're sitting in this netting and you're using these, the sail to go where you have to go. And of course I'm like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. No problem. I really probably didn't, but I was overly confident in my abilities to sail, like, as if I was like, did this my whole life. I think I did in camp once. So I tell the guy, I know what I'm doing. Sure. He's giving me the directions. I'm not even listening. So we go out into the water and we had a full, wind right at our back. So it just pushing us along, and it couldn't have been any more spectacular. You have this sort of cove where this resort was sort of in this cove of St. Lucia, where you have the Piton Mountains over on the sort of your left side. And then you had the ocean over to your right. And so we're just going sort of right in the middle of that. And we're just flying with this wind. And this thing just flies right over the waves. And it's just like magical, right? You have the wind in your hair, just leaning back. But before we know it, we are pretty far out. When you're as far out as the big cruise ships, there's something to worry about. When you start getting past them, you're really thinking about how far you are. And we saw that where the mountains were, we saw that we're outside this cove. And then all of a sudden it started, freaking out a little bit. You start worrying about like what's underneath you more. And I had to admit, it was like, oh no, what did we just do? So we're pretty far out there. And we realized we had to turn back. And she's yelling at me at this point. This is past this, loving stage. And may have been, no, it probably wasn't our first fight as a married couple, but it's probably one of the biggest first fights we had as a married couple. She'll have to chime in on that. And so we had to turn around. But it's easy to go with the wind when you have a sailboat. So we had to turn around the sailboat. We had to go a little bit against the wind because the wind's still going that same direction out from the island. And it started making us nervous because you had to sort of what they call tacking. I don't know if you're familiar with sailing at all, but you can't just, obviously, you probably know this, you can't just go back into a wind coming right at you. You have to do what they call tacking, which is going like in a zigzag approach against the wind, but, taking a little bit of that wind with you to go a little bit diagonal one way, then you go a little bit diagonal the other way. It allows sailing sort of to generally go in the right direction, even though you can't go straight forward in that direction. So eventually we made it back, although it took a lot longer and it was a much different direction than we came out there. And so we made it back. I think by that time, my wife was ready to not see me for a little bit of time. And I think probably for the next couple of days, I sat on that beach with her and just enjoyed the sound and the waves and had no adventures. But we did make it back. And I use that as an example of, your detour it still gets you in the right direction, although it's a much different way back. And I think when it comes to kids and our own life, one way getting to somewhere is super easy. It's with the wind, and we don't think about all the troubles and obstacles because everything just seems to work out. But then there's other times where everything we do is against the wind, and we can't go in the same direction that we did originally. We have to sort of go in a zigzag approach, just sort of get generally in the right direction we want to go, but it's not going to be a straightforward, fast approach like the other way. And when it comes to our students and in our own lives, we have to think about that that's okay and that's normal. So the first thing you have to do when you're in that moment is like we did on the sailboat. I had to first stop and just sort of gauge where I was in this moment and what's going on. I had to breathe and relax because you can't think straight if you're not. You had to think differently. I can't just do the same things that I was doing and get the same results. So I had to think different and do different in order to get this result to go where I wanted to go, back to this island in this case. And I really had to think small. I had to think about what is the thing that I can do right now to go in the right direction. I can't just think the destination. I have to think forward momentum. How do I get back to where I'm going through little small actions and ultimately be patient because I know it's going to take a lot longer to get back there than how it was to come out here. There's a great quote by Paulo Coelho, which says, when there's no turning back, then we should concern ourselves only with the best way of going forward. The only thing we should be thinking about when we struggle and when things are going wrong is what can we do to go forward and create some positive forward momentum. And that's how we get into this idea of control. And in our lives, especially now during COVID, there's a sense of absolute no control in everything that's going around us. Our students in our classrooms feel the same way if they're dealing with behavioral academic challenges. So let's dive into this idea of what control is and how do we perceive that control around us. And control is a perception as much as it is a reality. And stress builds when we feel out of control or that we can't control the situation or the environment around us. So this feeling of like helplessness overwhelms us. We forget quickly that we can actually control our actions, reactions, and responses to circumstances we are in. We totally forget that. We think that everything is happening to us instead of us being able to control at least a little aspect of things. And when that happens, don't feel bad or feel like you're controlling if you want to have more control. I feel like we make ourselves feel guilty if we don't have this sort of controlling attitude. It's actually built into our DNA. There's a need for that sense of control, and it's related to our sense of survival. So there's chemical reactions that push us and our minds and our bodies to react when we feel like we're in danger. So of course you're going to be more stressed if you feel like you're losing a sense of control. What's fascinating about life is that there's unpredictability in life, but that unpredictability is what makes it fun and special. Yet that's also what makes us to cause more stress in our lives. We can't control everything in our lives around us, but nor should we. Because if we could predict everything that was going to happen and control it, it'd be much less engaging and interesting and less surprising, which is all part of this sort of special feeling that we get through life. There's a large body of research that talks about what this means and how we can perceive reality and control. One example is something called locus of control. It's when we feel that our own choices and efforts dictate events in our lives. Our locus of control increases when that happens. With this increase comes many positive side effects psychologically, such as greater happiness, health, ability to cope with adversity. So ultimately, the more we feel like we can control our environment, all these positive things in our life naturally sort of happens to us. Sort of like self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Dr. Bandura, a social psychologist, called this self-efficacy. So self-efficacy is this internal belief that you have the ability to impact things in your life for the better. Your self-efficacy can be broad, like having a general sense of managing the direction your life is headed, or it could be specific, like feeling confident that you could be competent on a specific daily task, your agenda, checking off your to-do lists. Self-efficacy is critical when you get into scary or stressful situations because that belief that you can actually cause good things to happen helps drive you forward to actually do those things. Ironically, the only way to get more of this is to do it in the first place. You build your sense of self-efficacy the more that you actually accomplish things and are successful. And just remember this key point, it's perception that matters as much as, or if not more than, the actual reality of control. Feeling like we're in control helps us deal with situations better, lower stress, and we start to take positive actions. There are times in our life when we're truly at others' mercy, but that's not very often. Even now we could do little things to make our lives better or better for those around us. But we have to realize that we could do this in the first place, right? We got to know that we can make positive things happen in our lives. Sometimes people get really stressed because they feel like they have no control. But the reality is much different. And sometimes they just can't see it. So and it's our job as leaders in our school, or, and when I say leaders in our school, every single person is a leader in our school. But, as a friend, as a colleague, our job is to help others around us see that they can help their situation and help make it better. Even one positive action, smiling every single day, smiling and saying hi to the people you work with, even one small action can create forward momentum that takes us in the right direction. Maybe it's a detour. Maybe it's like on the boat tacking where we go back and forth and it takes a lot longer, but it's generally going in the right way to make us have a better sense of control in our lives. So getting into the school situations, this happens all the time when we're dealing with students. There was a time, this year where I was working with a student, and there was a situation with, behavior, sort of not necessarily bad behavior, but more like a meltdown situation with a student, and the student was really upset. And so in that moment, when you get in that moment as an educator, it can be scary sometimes because, I'm not going to pretend like I know every single little thing to do when I'm working with a student. Most of the time, it's really hard to know what exactly to do. And you have to learn more about the situation of the student, what they're going through first, before then you decide what to do. There's no automatic next step when students are having a moment of crisis. So knowing that you can't really control the student, right? You can just help them learn how to control themselves. That's a key factor. So kids, like the rest of life, are so unpredictable, and that's stressful, but that's what also makes our students interesting and fascinating and fun. Think how boring school would be if everything was the same and kids were all the same and there's no differences in how they acted. I know that's the easiest thing to say, right? It's like, oh yeah, it sounds nice until kids really act up. But you have to enjoy all those moments. It's the ups and downs of life. It's the valleys and peaks. It's the roller coaster rides. The whole thing is what makes it fun. But it's critical for us to be more mentally prepared to stop, live in the moment, and then find at least one thing we can do to help our students feel more in control. Our job is to help not only ourselves have that self-efficacy, but our students to build more self-efficacy. Next time you're in a situation where you don't know what to do and you're working with a student, maybe they're not listening to you or not following directions, maybe even a meltdown. One, know that you can help the situation. If you do something, you have that self-confidence yourself that you can help make the situation better. Two, stop, breathe, and slow down. Slow down and learn more about what's happening. Three, realize the path back to where you want to go may take longer. You're going to have to set more time aside, but you can get there, but you have to be more patient. Number four, work the situation itself. Be completely in the moment, engrossed in that moment with a keen sense of what emotions that your student is going through or what they're displaying. And you really have to talk it out, ride that emotional roller coaster, know that the thrill of the ride of what they're dealing with only comes from that steep and scary drops as well. So going through that whole journey is part of that ride. So don't wish you could sort of go through it faster. You can't get through it faster. You can't be through that journey as long as it's going to take to help regulate that emotion. Number five, we have to model the stability and control for our students. So if they see us displaying sense of out of control, or if our emotions are all up and down all the time, or if their behavior then causes our behavior to get all tense and angry or sad or whatever those things are, then that's going to be a poor model for how we want them to act. Remember, we want to model that stability and regulation in their behaviors. So we need to do that first. If they totally feel out of control in their lives, we need to be the rock in their world that they can rely on so they can start to regulate themselves. We can't do it for them, but we can definitely model how they should do it themselves. So wrapping this up, Ralph Waldo Emerson said, don't get angry over things you can't control. For every minute you are angry, you lose 60 seconds of happiness. Think about that. For every minute you're angry, you lose 60 seconds of happiness. Stop letting all those around you that maybe sometimes do so little for you, or situations that do so little for you in return, don't let them control all your thoughts, emotions, and feelings. And social media, be careful on there, you guys, because social media is definitely one of those things right now. Know that you have to either have self-control or others control. Either you control how you act and think and what next steps you take, or you're going to let others do that for you. And that's never as fun and never feels as good. So let's focus on one thing that we can do. The little moments are hard work we already know how to do. Do it with all your heart, your soul, your best, that best version of yourself. It's easy to be strong when things are going well and easy when that wind's at your back. But life is unpredictable. So we need to focus on one thing that you can do. Do what you do, but do it really well. Believe in what you can offer the world. Don't be average in what you do. Be special. Even if it's one little thing, be special. Let those gifts shine through that hard work and dedication, and push away that noise out there so you decide what matters to you right now. and watch that world change around you. That wraps up this episode. Follow me on social media at _AndyJax. Check out my website, andyjax.com, to sign up for my updates and blog posts. And please do me a favor. Can you go follow and rate this podcast so I know that you're connected? Have a great day, everybody. Go get after it.